Today we are going to learn about how to read from a file in Python. The first question coming to our mind is, why do we want to save our data inside the file rather than just working inside the Python environment? First, we need to know what happens to our variable when we are running our program. When we assign values to our variables, these variables are going to be saved inside the temporary memory of the computer, which we call RAM. So if I rerun the program, or if I close my PyCharm and reopen it, or if I restart my computer, or I move from one computer to another, I will lose my access to these variables. Let's test this and make sure this is the case. Now we can go and talk about the motivation and what the solution to this problem is going to be. So if I, for example, if I get the variable from the user, let's say I want to ask for the grade of the user using input command, I can say integer of input, what is your grade? So the user is going to give me the grade, and I'm going to print this value on the screen just to make sure that I am getting the right value and I'm saving it into the variable. So let's say, for example, the grade of the user is 78, and you see that the value of my grade 78 is printed on the screen, which means 78 was saved inside variable my grade. Now I want to prove it to you that if I rerun this program, I will lose my access to variable my grade, and my grade will be erased. I won't have that value on the memory of the computer anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out this line and simply say print my grade. If my grade is still on the memory, it should be printed. But if I rerun my program, if the program goes and erases the memory, I shouldn't see my grade on the screen, and I'll probably get an error from Python. Let's see which one is the case. You see the Python is giving me an error saying that even PyCharm is giving me the error saying that unresolved reference to my grade, which means variable my grade is not defined. So if you rerun the program, you are going to lose the values which are saved on the RAM. Obviously, if I close my PyCharm and open it again, if I restart my computer, if I move from one computer to another, it will be the same case. So now we are thinking of, okay, how we can save our data, get a permanent copy of our data. The good solution would be saving our data on the hard drive. And the type of variables we can save on the hard drive, usually we can put them in two categories. The first category will be the first kind, will be the text files. The beauty of the text files is human readable. You can easily look inside the file, look at the content and understand what's going on. But the downside is they are usually larger in size compared to the binary files, which are saved specifically for a specific type of softwares inside the computer. For the purpose of this lecture and for just to work with the files inside Python, let's just concentrate on text files. Why do we want to deal with text files? What is the benefit of working with the text file? The text files are easy to read. That's obviously the case, and they are cross-platforms. Why? Which means we have, if you have a text file on, for example, a Windows computer, you can take it and read it on a Mac or a Linux, and there are editors, basic, simple editors inside all these environments, which will help me to read the content of text files. So text files are very easy to deal with and read. How can we read? What are the steps to read a file inside Python? There are 3 steps we need to take. Step number 1 should be opening the file. And we are going to tell Python that I'm just going to give you the permission of reading this file, nothing else. Step number 2 will be reading the content of the file. And at the end, we just need to make sure that we are closing the file. How we are going to do this process, there is a function inside Python built-in function called open, and this function is going to help me to implement this process. The obvious input to this function is the name of the file, because I'm going to tell Python, okay, what file I want to open. So the first input we are going to pass to open function should be the name of the file. There is a second input which is optional actually, and this will tell Python what kind of permission I am giving the computer, I'm giving the program to deal with this file. By default, that value is R, which represents read. So you either put R, or if you don't pass it, by default will be R, and it means that I am letting Python just to go and read the content of this file. It doesn't have the permission to go and change the content, erase the content, modify the content, append anything, just read. And you may ask why we want to put such a limitation on our program. This is actually going to put another layer of security, some kind of protection on the data, in case we have sensitive information inside the file, and you want to make sure that inside the program, either by accident or maliciously, the content is not going to change. It's a very good idea to open the file with R permission. Another key point here is this function, open function, is going to return something that we call file object. And we are going to assign that value to a variable, and this variable will be the key, will be the gate to deal with this file. So from this point, whenever we want to deal with this file, words.txt or whatever we have opened using open file, we are going to refer to this variable. So let's go and do this process, work on an example inside PyCharm and see how this goes. Inside PyCharm, this is the environment I'm working, and this is my current working directory. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that folder and create a text file. Let's say inside this text file, I have the grades of the students, numerical grade of students in one of the classes I teach, right? Let's keep it simple. I call the file grades.txt. I can open it with very simple editors inside my operating system. And I want to put some numbers there. Let's say 98, enter. 79, enter. 67, enter. 81, enter. Let's just, for the time being, let's just concentrate on these 4 numbers. I put 4 numbers representing grades of 4 students on 4 different lines. I'm going to save this file and close it. Now this file is inside my current working directory. You see it says grades.txt is there. I want to open this file. I'm going to use open function inside Python. First input will be the name of the file. You just need to pass the name, and you don't need to type the whole name. If the file is inside your current working directory, it will grab it for you. Just use tab to grab it. In this case, let's say I just want to read the data from the file. I don't want to touch it. I'm going to give the permission of file. And as we discussed, we are going to assign the output from this function to a variable, and I'm going to name my variable wisely. I'm calling it file in, which means the input. This is an input file from which I'm reading my data. File in. From this point, whenever I want to deal with this file, whether I want to read from it, whether I want to look over the content, whether I want to close it, I have to always refer to this variable. How can we read the information inside this file? There are multiple ways of doing it, but an elegant way would be looping over the content and reading the content inside this file line by line. And when I say looping, we can use a for loop here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for, and for loop is going to read the content line by line. I'm going to name my loop variable wisely, because I'm going to read it line by line, maybe it's a good idea to name it line. You can name it anything you like, but line seems like a reasonable name for this variable. For line in, I want to say go and read inside this file. Again, I want to say go and read from grades.txt. I have to refer to this variable, which is my file object. So for line in file in. Let's see what's going to happen here. I can take a look at this grades.txt inside the editor in my pie chart. This loop is going to read the data inside this file line by line. Because there are 4 lines inside this file, my expectation is this for loop is going to get repeated 4 times. The first time, the value of line will be 98, then 79, then 67, then 81. And when the loop is over, we just need to make sure that we close the file. For the time being, just for investigation purposes, let's just print line and see what's going to happen. After the loop is over, as we discussed, the last step in opening and reading the file should be closing the file. Getting back to my point, I want to close the file. I want to deal with this file. What do I need to do? I need to say file in. And for this type of variable, there is a method called close, which will help me to close the file. So these 4 lines are going, in this line, I'm opening the file. In these 2 lines, I'm reading the content. And in this line, I am closing. Let's run this code and see what happens. Okay, we see that the code is reading the data and printing the outcome inside the output window. We can make some investigations to see what's going on. Investigation number 1, what type of variable line is? Is line a string? Is it an integer? What type of variable we are dealing with? To do that, we can use type command inside type function inside Python. Type will help you to realize, to understand to which class this variable belongs to. So I just need to say type line. Let's try it. And you see that the class of the variable line is str, which stands for string. Now I know that I'm dealing with the string type of variable. Another thing that you might notice when I printed out the result, you see that there is an extra blank line between my output. My data inside this file are on like different lines, but there's an extra line here between the data when I'm printing them here in the output window. And you may wonder why this is happening. I want to show you that when we are reading this line, guys, say line is a string. So when I'm reading the first value here, the first time I'm reading the value of line, the value of line is something like this. It's a string of 9 and 8. But I want to prove it to you that it is not just 9 and 8. There is a hidden \n at the end of this string. How can I prove it to you? Let's just remember that we can convert a string into a list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this string line into a list, and I want to take a look at the elements, items inside this sequence one by one to see what I have inside this string. Let's try that, see what happens. If I run this code now you see that, for example, for the first element, for the first number inside my file, it is not just 9 and 8, there is a \n at the end. And it's the same case for 79, 67, 81. And that extra \n at the end of my string is causing this extra blank line between my outputs. Now the question is why this is happening. Actually, if we go back and if you recall the way I created this file, what I did is, when, for example, if I want to put a new number, I say 85, enter. 92, enter. So every time you are putting a new number, you push enter to go to the next line. That enter actually is the \n we see inside the line string. It is not visible when we look at the data, but there's a hidden \n inside our data. That's what is causing this extra line. So there's a \n inside line, and each print command is going to take me to another new line. So there will be an extra line between my outputs. How can I address that issue? What I can do, we learned about a method for string type of variables, and that method is strip. Strip is going to help me to get rid of the extra white spaces in the beginning and the end of the string. So what I can do is, after reading the line from the file, I can simply strip it using strip method for strings. But just keep in mind that this method is not going to change the value of line. Why? Because line is a string is immutable. So simply applying this method, calling this method for line, it is not going to change its value unless I reassign it to the variable line. Or in this case, maybe it's a good idea to reassign it to a variable whose name is actually more meaningful. Maybe I can call it my grade. Now I can print my grade here, and you will see that I won't have the issue of extra line between my data points anymore. So I addressed that issue. For the last step, let's put some of the stuff we have learned in this course into some good use. And let's say I want to calculate the average of the grades inside this file. How can I do that? If you want to calculate the average, we need two pieces of information. I need the number of data points, number of grades inside this file, and I also need the summation of the numbers inside this file. So I'm thinking of defining two new variables inside my program and calculate them inside the loop, and at the end, when I have the summation, when I have the number of data points, I can simply calculate the average by dividing the summation by the count. So before going to the loop, I'm going to define two new variables, the counter, which keeps track of how many data points I have. So I'm going to start it with 0. And I'm going to define another variable, summation, which shows me the summation of the grades up to this point, the current summation. And again, I'm going to initialize this variable with 0. What is going to happen to these variables inside my loop? Every time I'm reading a new grade, it means one more grade, which means I have to increase my counter by 1. So I can say counter plus equal 1. What is going to happen to my summation? The value of my grade should be added to summation. So what I can do is I can say summation is equal to plus equal to my grade. So I'm adding my grade to my summation, but pay attention to the fact that my grade is coming from stripping the string line. So my grade is also a string. Just make sure that when you are converting it into an integer, so it is not going to cause any trouble for me inside the program. After the loop is over and after I close the file, I know that I read all the information inside the file. Now I can make a nice report saying that the average grade is, and I can use the variables I have calculated here, which is summation and counter, to report that number. Let's try that. And you see the average grade is 83.66. The last point here is, because this program reads the information from a file, if I want to run it and calculate the average for another set of data, I don't need to change my program. All I need is going to this file and providing the new information or modifying the content of this file. For example, maybe I have to make a correction and change the grade of this student to 81, or I want to add, I don't know, 2 more grades here. Let's say there's another student 88, there's another student, for example, 62, right? So these are the information I have in this file, some additional information. So this file is different from the file I was working with for the first time. I don't need to touch my code. I just need to rerun the code. It will automatically go read the data inside the file. As many data points I have, it will calculate the summation, it will calculate the counter, and it will report the average accordingly. And now you see that the average has changed. Thank you very much.